Hi guys, welcome to Short Skirts and Sarcasm. I'm Caroline, and today I'm going to tell you about all the books that I read in March. And there are 21 of them. So I'm going to go through them in alphabetical order. So the first one is A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab, and this is the third installment in the Shades of Magic trilogy. And like all the rest of them, I rated this one 5 stars because I loved it. And I will definitely reread this trilogy at some point. I did get nice hardback editions of them, so next time I read them, I won't have to wait 6 months in between books like I did when I was waiting for the audiobook from the library. Dark days. Next, I have every single book in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. So I'm not going to read them to you because I'm sure you've heard of them because they're literally so famous. I picked them up because they're so hyped on YouTube, and I was getting FOMO. I enjoyed them. I think I rated them all 4 stars out of 5 because I don't think that the writing is really like high quality and it's not really my usual thing, but it was very fun and entertaining, and I think that we could all use a bit of fun, entertaining reads just in general, but especially this past calendar year. And then I read the short story Blood is Another Word for Hunger by River Solomon, and I also really enjoyed that. It's only like 30 pages or so you could like get through it definitely in a day. I read mine like on a break in between meetings at like lunchtime-ish, and it was really good. And this was at the beginning of March, so I've forgotten pretty much everything that happens, but I really enjoyed the writing style, and it made me want to read more River Solomon in the future. So I would recommend that. And then I've got another short story, Chivalry by Neil Gaiman, and I think this was originally in Smoke and Mirrors, because I've definitely read this one in a collection of short stories of Neil Gaiman's before, but my problem with reading short stories is that I can never remember anything about them. So it was available at the library, so I decided to read it again, and I think it was enjoyable the second time around as it was the first time around, especially because I couldn't remember what it was about. Next, another Neil Gaiman, Coraline, and I know this is a children's book, but I never read it when I was a kid. And I blame Neil Gaiman personally for every single time someone has not been able to say my name correctly because they think my name is Coraline, which it's not. Next, I've got Dear Girls by Ali Wong, and this is a sort of memoir of the comedian Ali Wong, and it's addressed to her 2 daughters. And it is insightful and heartwarming and really funny, and it's also pretty short, so if you want something that is to get you out of a slump, I would really recommend this one. And it's, again, so funny. And then next I have Don't Touch My Hair by Emma DeBerry, and I really enjoyed this book. It's another pretty short one, so you could read it like in a few days if you wanted to. And I love books like this, which take like individual facts that I know individually and like strings it all together to make a whole narrative, and then you go, oh duh, why didn't I think of this before? This is one of those books. And so I really enjoyed this one. It is about hair, as you might guess, and Emma DeBerry is Black and Irish, and she talks about her childhood growing up in Ireland and how not everyone would like understand her hair or how to care for it and style it, etc. And so it's partly a memoir of like her own experience with her own hair growing up in Ireland, and I think then moving to London. And it's also a history of black hair, essentially, and how it relates to geometry, and which is like not a connection I had previously made. So I got like super excited when she started talking about like math and geometry, and I was like, how is this gonna relate? And it I really, really enjoyed the way it all came together at the end. And then next I've got Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe by Fanny Flagg, and this was a reread for me. I read this originally quite a while ago, and so I remembered like the general storyline, but I I couldn't remember a lot of the details. So I'm really glad that I read this book, and I read it again on audiobook, and I think the narrator does a really good job with this book. I would say this is a complicated book in a number of ways. It originally came out in 1987, and it is set, like the main timeline of the story is set in the mid 80s, and it follows this woman Evelyn who is in this marriage that she's like not super enthusiastic about. Her adult children have sort of grown away from her, and she's going through a really terrible menopause, and she visits her husband's mom in a care home, and I don't think she gets on with her mother-in-law that well. And so she sort of drifts off to be by herself, and then this other resident of the care home comes up to her and just starts babbling at her. And at first she's like, I don't want to talk to people right now. And then the lady is like, oh yeah, well, I knew this girl and I never believed she committed that murder. And Evelyn is like, what now? And so they start a friendship that sort of Evelyn goes through her own journey of self-discovery and self-actualization thanks to her friendship with Ninny Threadgood. And then Ninny Threadgood tells Evelyn about sort of her life in the town of Whistle Stop. And then the narrative also jumps back in time and focuses on the Whistle Stop Cafe, which serves fried green tomatoes sometimes, and the two women that run it, Ruth and Iggy. And it's a really, really heartwarming story about, like, a bunch of sad things happen, but it's all about staying hopeful and appreciating the small good things even when things are bad. And so it is, I would say, heavily hinted at that Ruth and Iggy are in a relationship, in a romantic relationship. It's never like said outright, but there's so much subtext. And there's also like Ruth's family is like, oh, Ruth has a crush. No, other way around. Iggy's family is like, oh, Iggy has a crush on Ruth. And it seems that their relationship is pretty accepted by pretty much everyone. And so like their cafe that they co-own together becomes sort of the social beating heart of the town of Whistle Stop. And because it's set in the early 20th century, I think it starts a little bit before World War I and then ends a little bit after World War II. I think it ends, that side of the timeline sort of ends in the early 1960s, I'd say. And so a lot of it, because it's set in Alabama, has to do with racism and the reign of terror of the Klan, and living under, apartheid isn't the word I'm looking for, what is it? Jim Crow, under Jim Crow rule and segregation. And I think when this book came out in 1987, it would have been considered actively anti-racist. Reading it now in 2021, it definitely has some problems in that department. It centers whiteness where maybe it shouldn't, and it definitely uses like some outdated language, which again might have been considered polite at the time, but now is definitely not anymore. I would actually like to learn more about the way this book was received at the time when it was published. I have done like a Google Scholar search, and it's mostly about specifically standing up to the Klan and the romantic relationship between Ruth and Iggy, not so much how the book has aged. So if you know of any writings or if you have opinions, please let me know, because I think this is a really interesting book and it's layered and complicated, and I could keep talking about it, but since we have 21 books to get through, I'm going to move on. So the next book I read was From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout, and this is a book club book that I'm reading, well, that I read, and I would have never chosen this book to read for myself because it's a fantasy romance, and it's not YA, but I think the writing feels very YA. And that's not to say I didn't enjoy it. I rated it 3 stars out of 5. It was okay. I think the main character was really well fleshed out, but I think the dialogue was super cringy, and the love interest just was annoying. I did not like him, and I think that main character could do better, but she's locked in now. So I'm going to continue with this series because I like to finish what I start, and also I like to sort of torture myself. And I read Norse Mythology, also by Neil Gaiman. I think this is the last Neil Gaiman on this list. And it's basically just Neil Gaiman's sort of telling of the Norse myths, which is not something that I previously read a lot about. So it was enjoyable. I rated it 4 stars. It's nice and short. I listened to the audiobook. Neil Gaiman reads his own audiobooks for most of them. I think he has a really nice voice. So it was just all fun stuff that I really enjoyed. You know, when you finish your TBR and you're on hold for other books and you're like, what should I read next? That's when I go to the Libby, all my books on Libby, and see which audiobooks are available, and just download one of those to get them out of the way. And I did that with Our Souls at Night by Kent Harif. And it's a really, really short audiobook. It's like 4 hours long or so, and I listen to my audiobooks on triple speed. So I listened to the entire thing on a walk. And it was a sunny day, and I was wearing sunglasses, which is a good thing because it made me tear up so many times. Like, there is so much emotion in such a little book. It's impressive. And I did write a whole review on this. It is up on my website, and it's up on Medium as well. So you can look at the links in my description if you want to read that. And it is just about 2 people in their 70s who their spouses have died, their children have grown up, and they just want some companionship, especially at night, which is when loneliness hits hardest. And they sort of develop a romantic relationship, but I don't think the romantic relationship is the point. It is about providing each other with companionship. And it's just really nice and wholesome, and I loved it so much. And it is wholesome in the same way that fried green tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe is wholesome. So if you like one of these, I think you would like the other one as well. And then next I read Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, and I enjoyed it. There was a great mystery element to it, and I did not see it coming. I had an idea, and I was like kind of disappointed when I got to the reveal that it wasn't the thing I was thinking of. It was excellent, and the writing was really good in it. And something that I both appreciated and which kind of bothered me is that a lot of the nouns are capitalized, which is is correct grammar in German. Like, all of the nouns are capitalized. In English, that's not the case. So reading it, I was like, this is correct, but in the wrong language. So it was something that like bothered me in a silly way and not like a real bothersome way. I was just like, this is confusion. Next, this was another one of, I'm just gonna borrow what's available. I read Royally Screwed by Emma Chase, which is kind of a trashy romance about a hot young prince who is under pressure from his grandma to marry someone. And he's like, I don't want to though. And then he goes to New York, meets a waitress who runs a diner, and they fall in love. It's a really predictable romance with a lot of smut, and I wouldn't say it's bad, but it's definitely also not good. And it is the first in a series, and yes, I am going to read the rest of the series, and I will update you on how much it destroyed my soul. Then I read The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry, and this is historical fiction, and I liked it, but I didn't love it. I don't think I will ever reread this, but the cover is too pretty to give away. And so this is about widow Cora Seaborn, who has had a terrible marriage, and she's kind of sad but also kind of relieved that her husband has died, and she moves to Essex, and she is really interested in paleontology and the findings of Mary Anning. And Stuff You Missed in History class has an episode on Mary Anning. If you don't know who that is and want to learn more, I will link it in the description below. It's called like the Princess of Paleontology, if you just want to Google it, something like that. And I've listened to that episode a few times, and it is really interesting. So thank you to Stuff You Missed in History class for allowing me to understand this book. And so she moves to Essex because, but there are rumors of a serpent that is eating livestock, and it lives in the sea. Does it eat livestock? I can't remember. There's a sea serpent in Essex, and she was like, huh, that's interesting. And she develops sort of this friendship with a local clergyman, and her son makes friends with his kids as well. And it's an interesting story, and it does not end up the way you might expect. And I enjoyed that aspect of it. And I mostly enjoyed the writing style. It's not my usual writing style, but I enjoyed it. Next, I read The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. And this is a book that's, I think, 517 pages long. And I got the ebook from Libby, and because it was in such high demand, I only got 7 days to read it. So I did speed through this, and I think at some point in my lifetime I will reread this book because it was really excellent in my opinion. So all the details are kind of blurred. The story is really, really compelling. It's about three sisters. It's heavily hinted that they were abused in childhood, and they had drifted apart in sort of teenager adulthood, like early adulthood, and they all converge and meet again at a rally for women's suffrage in 1893. Essex Serpent is also set in 1893. For some reason, the Sweet Far thing did not end up on this list, but it was on my March TBR, and I did read it in March. All three sisters converge on the same rally and reignite their relationship and forge a bond, or reforge a bond, closer, better, stronger than it was before. And what I also really enjoyed about this is the discussions on the women's suffrage movement. Alex E. Harrow talks about the very real debates that were going on inside the movement at the time about respectability and also race. And Stuff You Missed in History class also has episodes on both of these things. So I will also link them down below. I did also write a review of this book, which is up on my website and on Medium, and has links to those episodes, so you can head there and check it out if you want. And next, I'm not sure why this didn't end up on my wrap-up list, but it is a book that was on my March TBR, and I did read it in March. So it is the Sweet Far Thing by Libba Bray, and it's the third book in the Gemma Doyle trilogy. And I read these when I was in middle school in the 2000s, and I enjoyed them, and I decided I would do a little project reread of my Libba Bray books, and so far they all hold up. They're all excellent. And this is no different. I really, really enjoyed this one. This might be my favorite of the Gemma Doyle books. It's also the biggest. I have the ebooks, like I did have the paperback version, but the paperbacks are in California, so I can't read those. So I do have the ebooks. And I forgot how big these books are. Like the first one isn't that big. It's like 400 something pages. And then the second one is like 600 something. And then the third one is 830 pages. So I forgot how big this book was, but because it's YA, it's pretty page turny and easy to read. So it didn't take me all that long. And in this, it's the culmination of Gemma's mission to, save the world from an otherworldly evil. And I think this one shows Gemma's emotional growth the best. and shows her growth in friendships, and has a really powerful ending. I forgot about the depth, like the emotional depth of the ending, and it really got me. I definitely teared up at the end of this book, and I would really recommend pretty much all Libba Bray books, but I think especially the Gemma Doyle trilogy. It's one of those like classic 2000s YA books. I would actually like to talk to people more about this, because something that Libba Bray does in her writing, especially in her historical writing, she never attempts to whitewash real history. And this is something that she does in like the Gemma Doyle trilogy and also the Diviners series, which I am also planning to reread, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. Libba Bray is a white author, and she purposely always has diverse characters in terms of race. She always has disability rep, and she always has a queer rep. And I think in some books, especially the disability is done better than in other books, but it's always there. And I know at least a few months ago, there was a discussion on BookTube about should white authors write people of color, and specifically in how this related to The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue and that one by Naomi Novik that I hate. Talked about Libba Bray, and I would love to hear other people's opinions on if she does it well or not, and if her writing has grown. So if you have recently or not recently read any Libba Bray and want to talk to me about that, I would definitely welcome it, because Libba Bray is one of my favorite authors, and I think there's a lot to talk about. Next, I read The Priory of the Orange Tree, another chunky book. And you probably know that I started this one in February, and I gave myself some extra time because it is so big. I think it's also 830 pages, and I really like this one. And because it is high fantasy, the details of all of this have literally departed my brain already, but I really enjoyed the writing style, and I would definitely reread this. I really loved the imagery on this, and of course I also love the dragons, because dragons are great and you can't go wrong there. And then my last March book was The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami. And I have an entire vlog dedicated to this book because there is so much going on and yet also so little explanation. And I talked about this with my book club, and we were all sort of united, and there were some really great parts to this, but then they didn't go anywhere, and that wasn't so great. So literally we all rated this one 3 stars, because I was like, enjoyed it, but there were some major problems, especially on how Haruki Murakami writes women, because I'm semi-convinced that he's never actually met a human woman before. Anyway, I've gotten to the end of my list, and I did make some stats, and I will share the graph with you. And I now realize that I only put 21 books on this list, but really I read 22. I missed out the Sweet Far thing, even though, like I said, Libba Bray is one of my favorite authors, and I should have put her on here. So these are a little bit off, but I read 14.3% print books, and both ebooks and audiobooks are 42.9%. And the total books are 22, including the Sweet Far thing, and the total pages, 8,608 pages, not including the 800 pages of the Sweet Far thing. So over 9,000 pages, doing well. So I am not sure that I will be able to replicate this amount, this volume of books in April, but we'll see. So you can like this video and subscribe, and you can also check out all my links in the description below, especially the podcast episodes and the reviews that I mentioned. And I will see you next time. Bye.